Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. My name is Brendan, and if you haven't checked out the channel before, welcome. I've taken a little bit of time off of YouTube for the last month or so, maybe even a little bit longer. I was really just evaluating how my channel was doing, what videos were performing well, and I wanted to get a sense of where this channel would be going in the future. So with that said, going forward, I will be posting once a week. I'll be dropping videos every Sunday where we talk all things product design. You'll be seeing videos like my product design talks. I might be doing software reviews, as you saw with Milanote, or anything else that kind of comes up top of mind that I think you should know about. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the observations that I've made in my first 100 days as a product designer. If you don't know, I've been at my company for a year and a half. I work for a company called Flowcast. We are an accounting-based software company, and I went from the sales department over to product in December, and so now I've been in the position for 100 days, and I think that these are some things that hopefully you'll be able to learn from, and it'll make your life maybe a little easier as you transition into your career in product design. So let's talk about some of those observations. The first observation that I made is that product discovery should be done by 3 different departments. It should be done by a product manager, a product designer, and a developer lead. Now, your product team might feel a little differently about this in your company. What I've come to realize is that designers and developers, as the people that are creating the product, should be involved as early on in the process as possible, so that way we understand the problems that we're trying to solve and what we're trying to do with the product. From a product designer standpoint, the reason this is so important for me is so that I can build the product in an intuitive way and hopefully solve some of the usability issues right up front, because I know exactly what I'm trying to do. I know who I'm creating this product for, and obviously you're going to have usability issues down the road and throughout the entire process, but you can avoid some of the initial ones that you might have made if you are in that discovery process and you are listening to calls, you're getting on calls with people, and you're doing the upfront discovery that's required when it comes to building out a product. So that would be my first suggestion, is making sure that you get involved in the discovery process as soon as possible, and just don't be afraid to speak up and gather as much information as you can in that process. The second observation that I made is that when you are handing off your designs, you got to make sure that you're using a tool where your developer can inspect the code. Now, this may seem like a very obvious one, but we didn't have a great process for myself when I came in. There is one other designer. We use Sketch, and we also have InVision, so we could use Craft. For some reason, he's had issues with Craft in the past, but for me, it was working just fine. When I first started handing off my designs, I would send over PNGs because I didn't think we had a process, and of course it's not going to look exactly how you want it to look. Now that I'm doing it through Craft, my developer is able to inspect the code. That way he can pull assets from it, as well as see the font that I use, the font size, the colors that I use, the borders, all the different things that a developer would need to do in order to make that design look as closely as possible to your design. Now, if you're using another tool such as Figma or Adobe XD, I'm sure there's a way for developers to be able to inspect the code. I would do some research into that. This does seem fairly obvious, but as teams are just starting to grow in a lot of startups, this process may not be ironed out. So I would definitely recommend looking into what tools are out there, depending on what tool stack you're currently using, and make sure to get an inspect tool for your developers. The third observation I wanted to bring up is that your sprint planning meetings may be ran through a developer's lens instead of a designer's lens. And the reason that this often is because there's a lot more developers in teams than designers. I mentioned that we only have 2 designers in our company right now, and we have a lot more developers. So of course, when it comes to Jira tickets and we're going through what we're working on in our backlog as well, it's always going to be seen in the form of what does the developer have to do next. So it's really important as a designer to make sure that your product is being seen in a design lens as well as a user experience lens. You don't want to be developing something early on that doesn't have a good user experience. So it is your role as the product designer to make sure that those things are being seen. So with the project that I was first brought on, it was early stage in discovery, and so a lot of that development was having to be done early on. And now as we're continuing to progress, we're starting to see that user experience is more and more crucial. It of course is always important, but it's becoming more and more apparent as we're starting to show it off to customers and our internal team. So that's just something to keep in mind. It may look a little different as the product develops, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you guys are keeping this top of mind, making sure that you're being proactive with discussing designs in terms of user experience and intuitiveness early on. The fourth observation that I want to make is that it's really important for you to do your design work proactively rather than reactively. Honestly, I think this lesson is probably the biggest takeaway that you should get from this video, because when you're proactive, you can be more creative and more strategic in the way that you design. When you're proactive, you already know the screens that you're going to need to create, but you can start to anticipate some of the screens that might not have been thought through. So there might be a feature that you're going to be creating in the distant future that you can already begin to create designs for and come up with multiple iterations of what that could look like. And that gives you a lot more freedom to be creative, but also really allows you to think about the problem that you're solving for, because you have that time. And so you can be really strategic with your design. When you're reactive, you're basically doing those designs as they're given to you, and you may not be able to give your own input as far as the user experience for that page. It might have already been developed, and now you just have to make it look good, essentially. And this isn't really what a product designer should be doing. This is something that maybe a UI designer strictly could be focused on, but you want to really think about the problem that you're trying to solve and be strategic with the way that you're doing it, and not just accept the way that it's being done already. You want to really think through those things. And of course, you can iterate over time, but the goal is at the very forefront. You want to be proactive with your design, think through these problems rather than be reactive. So make sure to keep this top of mind as you are starting off your transition, because really this is everything in the beginning. If you are just doing reactive design, you really aren't a product designer, in my opinion. The fifth observation is, when possible, try to give people 3 options to choose from when it comes to a design. I've heard that there is a science behind giving people 3 options. I mean, you can think in the real world, there's several examples of this. Oftentimes when you go to pricing pages, you're going to give 3 plans. If you go to get gas, for example, there's the 87, the 89, and the 91. For some reason, I think for our brains, it's just easier for us to choose between those 3 options. But the other thing is, when it comes to design, it gives people somewhere to give you design critique a little easier. If you're just judging one design, someone who's maybe a non-designer, there's not a whole lot that you can go from. You just kind of have to go with your feel, go with your gut as far as what you think would be better about that specific design. But when you're given multiple options, you can say, I like a little bit of this and I like a little bit of that over here. And a lot of the times you might create iterations, and it might take a 4th, a 5th, a 6th design, but those first 3 designs are what give a lot of the influence to that other design. So you're not always going to have the option to do 3 designs. It depends really on the scope of the feature or how much time you have to do it. But when you have the option, make sure to create 3 choices. This really does help. I've noticed it for myself a couple of different times with several different features, honestly. So just wanted to throw that out there. Definitely try this out. I think it'll really help you as you try to hone in on what you're trying to create. And the last thing that I'll say is, this is a great example of being a proactive designer, because you're thinking strategically through the 3 different options. And I think that this is just going to really enhance your overall product. And the 6th and final observation that I wanted to make is that it's really important for you to understand how different teams operate and how they communicate. A lot of the times as a designer, it's going to be an understaffed department, so you're going to be working in multiple teams. And I can say this to be true for myself. I'm working in 2 teams, and there's a very different experience between the 2 teams at this moment, which isn't a bad thing. It's just really important to recognize it. So for example, the first team that I started working on, we've now built rapport because we've been working together for months and months. And we have a sort of dialogue that is basically, we can text each other on Slack at any moment, and then give each other a random call, discuss ideas, And this may not work for every other team that you're working in. With the other team, obviously we haven't really gotten to that point, and I think it's really important for you to recognize that you can't necessarily communicate with your team in the same exact level. You might have to kind of work up to do something like this. So just wanted to make that apparent that you might be working in multiple teams, especially if you're a larger company. We're not even a large company. We're like 150 employees, but we have several different pods and products that we're working on all in a given time. And so you will more than likely be working with multiple teams. Well, that about wraps up this video. Thank you again so much for watching. Like I said, I'm going to be posting a product design video once a week where I'll be talking about all things product design. I hope to see you guys in the next one, and I'll catch you next week.